I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners back to order for Tuesday, December 11th, 2018, as we start our afternoon session on Public Works. And our first item on the agenda is item 12A, which is the fifth reading and deliberations on ordinance number 1808 in the matter of amending Lane Code 16.090 definitions, 16.210 F1 zone, 16.211 F2 zone, and 16.212 EFU zone, and 16.214 ML zone, and 16.264 telecommunication tower standards to update definitions, modernize terminology, enhance the user experience by simplifying the code, streamlining review processes, and align the code more closely with state law, and adopting a savings and severability clause, file number 509 PA 18-05035. And we have Amber Bell, our senior planner, here.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. This is a fifth reading of Ordinance 1808. As you may recall, at the fourth reading on November 27th, the board provided direction to staff to make some specific revisions to the ordinance. Those included deleting the clear and objective siting standards in the F1 and F2 zones, deleting the discretionary forest siting standards applicable to structures and dwellings in the forest zones that mirrors the language of OAR 660 Division 6, Section 29, to delete the guest house use and the corresponding standards, and then also to delete the template dwelling criterion that references the requirement to comply with any other code or requirements of law in the F2 zone. In the packet before you, staff has made those changes, and we've also made a few other revisions that we have inferred was the intent of the board based on the board's motion and deliberations on the 27th. So specifically, the board did not provide direction to amend the EFU siting standards. However, we have inferred from the board's discussions that that was the board's intent. And so staff has made similar changes to the siting standards in the EFU zone, and we've deleted the clear and objective siting standards in the EFU zone. With the removal of the clear and objective siting standards in the forest zones, staff have clarified that the structures subject to siting standards will now be subject to a type 2 procedure, and that's given that evaluation of those standards involves exercising some discretion, which constitutes a land use decision. But with that, with the elimination of the clear and objective standards, staff have added back in the 200 by 200 foot same site area that applies to accessory structures and replacement dwellings. We understood that that was discussed in the board's deliberation, and by adding that back in, that would allow accessory structures and replacement dwellings that do comply with the same site area measurement to still follow a type 1 procedure and not a type 2 procedure. Also, in addition to the revisions that have been made in the ordinance already mentioned, staff have provided an alternative version of the F1 non-impacted forest land zone as an attachment to the board's packet, and that includes one difference. That is that we've added in the planning director determination procedure for where an applicant requests a determination of whether a specific activity falls within a permitted or type 1 use. As you may recall, we added that into the EFU zone and the F2 zone based on public comment that was received earlier in the process. And that change was only made to the F2 and EFU zone because that is consistent with the currently adopted version of Lane Code Chapter 16. However, that request could be made in the F1 zone as well, and so if the board would like to add that into the F1 zone, that could be folded into today's motion, and staff would be happy to make that revision in the F1 zone as well. We have received some comments from Sean Malone that we received just before noon today. At this point, the record has been formally closed, the written record for this process. If the board makes a motion to reopen the record or a hearing today, then staff would be happy to distribute those comments at the next reading. Lindsay Eigner has also worked on this project. She's been out on leave, as you may know, and she's back. We'd both be happy to answer any questions that the board has today. And that concludes our opening remarks.
Questions for staff? So I'll just say I'm really pleased with you all being able to get this done so quickly. I know that it was a tough assignment. And I also appreciate you clarifying for folks the same site, or the 200 by 200 same site type 1 review for replacement dwellings and accessory buildings. I got this. I know I'll get the terminology wrong going from memory, but I just wanted to make sure that was clear. That my intent of removing that clear and objective was not to get rid of that same site type 1 process. I do think that the suggestion of adding the add-in for the F1 zone of the use determination through a type 2 process, I would agree that's a good addition to the code. And the interpretation of, kind of keeping the EFU zone matched up with what we suggested in the F1 and F2 and marginal land zones follows board intent. So as I look through all this, I think, I believe you captured the intent, which was to roll back those siting standards and to kind of bring the guest house standard back to what it was before, where it was just considered an accessory building. So that all seems to have been done very well. What I would like to talk about a little bit, and this is part of the discussion for the board because it should probably be part of the motion, besides incorporating the that your suggestion under the F1 type 2 process on use determination that should be part of the motion, is reopening the record on these specific changes. I think we've gone through hearings and all that, and the Chapter 16 revisions are lengthy, but this move backwards on the siting standards and guest houses in particular was post-closing of the record. And I have received some comments of folks requesting that a public hearing be held, some comments that were inaccurate because they got misinformed. That we were going to make the decision next week on this without a hearing, and we all discussed towards the end of the last meeting that there was no way we could finish this before the year end. We were going to have to schedule another reading in January. The question I'm looking towards is there the ability to maybe reopen the record on these specific changes and hold a hearing in January? And that's kind of somewhat of a legal question. Can we reopen the record on a limited basis, or do we have to just reopen the record and reopen the hearing?
Well, staff and I talked about this in context with a reopened hearing. My sense is the same thing would apply to the record. I don't think it's a good idea to try to limit what's there. I think what makes sense is for the board to say, essentially, these are the things we're concerned about and want to hear about.
Yeah.
Submit stuff to the record. To the extent that people submit stuff you don't care about at this point, you glance at it and move on, I think. So the litigant strategy, I guess, would be give you what you want and the answers you're looking for. And as long as the board puts that out there, hopefully you'll get stuff that's targeted towards your interests.
I just don't want to set us up for a simple appeal that we failed to reopen the record on a significant change.
Right. I think that makes a bunch of sense. For the same reasons, I would be a little cautious about trying to limit what comes in.
Okay. So. And I was trying to save staff headache in trying to limit their work in what gets submitted in new testimony or additional testimony or repeat testimony from prior issues that have been resolved.
They assure me they have hardly anything going on toward the end of the year, so it shouldn't be a problem.
Yes. No, nothing better to do. But great. I appreciate that advice, though. So I'll turn it over to the board for discussion, but my recommendation is that we approve this reading and set a sixth reading and reopen the record and hold a hearing at that time, a public hearing at that time. Not unlimited, obviously, just on the ordinance. And including in that fifth reading would be those changes suggested by staff on the F1 Type 2 process for use determination. Am I saying that correctly? That's the option you guys added that wasn't part of last week's motion.
Correct.
Or 2 weeks ago's motion, I should say.
Correct.
And I'll just note for the board's discussion, we could reopen the record, reopen just the record, we could reopen the hearing. It's at the pleasure of the board. We don't have to do.
I'm leaning towards hearing just because I think that's much more public and transparent rather than just written record. But I'll leave that to my fellow board members in some way. I will also look towards Commissioner Sorensen about which day works better. Currently, the motion in here is suggesting the 8th of January, but if it's going to be a public hearing, that's going to be the first full day of the new board. So I was thinking you might want to wait to the 15th, but that's, so I'll take your input on that. So Commissioner Sorensen.
Yeah, well, first of all, on the issue of a reopening of the record or a reopening of the record and a public hearing, I would agree that it'd be better to have a full reopening of the record and public hearing. And then on the timing, I'm by no means an expert on all of the timing, but I think that Commissioner Bozievich is correct that the first week of the year is pretty front-loaded already. There's the swearing in on the 7th. There's a full board meeting already on the 8th. There's a big budget briefing on the 9th. So I think that it's not a good idea to set this public hearing that early. So later would be better. I think, is 15th a Tuesday, the following Tuesday? Okay. Yeah.
And at least at this point, Diana Jones has said either the 8th or the 15th would work as far as her scheduling of agenda items. So if we want to go past the 15th, I think we need to double check to make sure we're open then. Any other questions for staff or comments from the board relative to reopening the record or a public hearing? Adding in the F1 Type 2 use determination process, everyone seems to think that's okay to be part of the motion.
It's fine.
There's no other input. I'll look to somebody to try and put that into a motion.
And in preparation for that, the things to keep in mind are when you want to reopen the record, and I would suggest you don't need to think about a date now to close the record. That would be done after the hearing or at the hearing.
Yeah.
So.
I think we could reopen the record immediately.
Immediately, yeah.
And that way, maybe Mr. Malone's letter can get put in the record.
So I'm going to defer to Commissioner Farr because if you remember, I threw in the towel on this one, so.
And you won't be here on the 15th.
I will not be here on the 15th.
So I'm going to craft a motion, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. And I'm going to look at Andy as I work through this, because make sure that I get all the right words in there to make it understandable to whoever may read it. So I'd like to, let's see, accept the fifth reading and move for a sixth reading on ordinance number 18-08 on January 15th, 1:30 p.m., time certain, and reopen the public hearing immediately as of the passage of this motion. And,
I'm sorry, reopen the record, you mean?
excuse me, the record, thank you. As of the passage of this motion, to be closed at a, well, just reopen the record.
Yeah. And to hold a public hearing on.
And did I say to hold a public hearing? No.
Need to reopen the.
Sixth reading and public hearing on January 15th. at 1:30 PM. Do I need to do anything else in that, Andy?
Could you identify the F1 Type 2 use determination process in that motion?
And that piece you may
Intended
wanna-
to, yes. So the Type 2, the F1 Type 2 nomenclature has been presented to us today in the fifth reading. So now, with that motion, I'm intending that people would look at that and potentially just give us more public record on the F1 Type 2, but it's open for any additional public input.
Right.
Okay.
So
How's that, Lisa?
we have a motion to approve the fifth reading, set the sixth reading, and a public hearing for January 15th, and immediately reopen the public record on ordinance number 1808, including staff's suggested language around the Type 2 process in the F1 zone for use determination. Is there a second?
Before I get the second, Lydia, you were looking at me. Is there something I'm missing in your? Okay, all right. Okay, sounds good.
Did I restate it well? Is there a second to the motion?
Yes.
So
So it's
now,
been moved by Commissioner Farr, seconded by Commissioner Sorensen.
and as the maker of the motion, can you read that back to me, please?
If you'd like to, I can restate the motion for you.
So the motion is to, just for clarification, the motion is to reopen the public record, accept the fifth reading, and set a sixth reading for January 15th,
And public hearing.
and public hearing for January 15th at 1:30 PM time certain. And it would include the added language today that was presented today in the fifth reading on Type 2 F1, use and designation. Okay. All right.
Great. Any discussion to the motion?
Thank you.
Seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye,
Any opposed?
I think.
That's a 5-0 vote, I believe, so thank you. Passes unanimously.
And could we limit that meeting to 20
Record is
minutes?
now open on ordinance number 1808.
Quick hearing. Yeah, we will get you the latest information that's come in, I think, and I think staff will also put a publication in the newspaper about the reopened public hearing for the 15th, so.
Yeah. All right, so that's going to make us jump back to commissioners' business that we skipped over this morning in order to get to our executive session. Any commissioners' announcements?
One quick one.
Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just for the record, the Senate is voting on the Farm Bill today. And I say that because there's some important information in the Farm Bill, and it was already passed the House. Senate's voting on it today. Should give them time to do some reconciliation before the end of the year, before the president signs it. But one of the key components I wanted to read to you real quick, this was sent to me yesterday, and this is something we actually worked with the Senate Ag staff on, and we got the language in there. And so, and it's on one piece, it's under, in fact, it was interesting having the presentation by the extension this morning, and she was focusing on forestry. So the piece that I think is important, and while it's not as what I would call robust as the House on one's called forestry, but I think something that, and it's this language. And the bullet point says, and this is summary. I'm not going to go through all the blah, 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 the information, but this is the summary. So extends the insect and disease categorical exclusion through 2023, which helps reduce litigation risk, and clarification that hazardous fuel reductions are an eligible activity and purpose under the categorical exclusion. Fuel reduction meaning forest management. And that was something that we worked with them, and as some of you know, one of my close friends, his wife is actually communications director for the chairman of the Senate Ag Committee. And so was able to, when asked, I was able to provide. And so while it's not, like I said, it's not near as robust as the House, but at least it's a really good start on the Senate side. And hopefully some of that language will be included when the final bill comes to fruition. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Farr?
No.
Yeah, oh, started to raise your hand there for a minute. So any other announcements from commissioners? If not, I'll move to agenda team request and work session request. And do you want to talk about ONC Counties Association?
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is an agenda team request, and it's one that I will probably have to doing the request now and to bring back to the board next week, and hopefully under consent. So at the Association of ONC Counties, the bylaws were changed, and before, the board members elected were basically, you didn't have to be from a specific county representing. Some of the counties that are part of the association were left out and not on the board. The bylaw change that's really important is that now the board it's going to expand the board, but every single county will have a representative on the association. So I'm leaving, of course, and I will not be part of this. But with that, I think it will be important for this to come back to the board next week. And my recommendation is that Jay be the person. And that would be my thought. He's been pretty involved in this. The other thing that I want to bring up, too, is that the association is, in fact, I've been really pleased with this, and I was glad to be part of the original work group that got us to where we are. But the association is very much engaged in helping Senator Wyden and Senator Crapo write this new endowment bill that is now a bill. The name's going to change going into next year, but it's something that's being introduced by Senator Wyden and Senator Crapo. Right now, they're just introducing an SRS extension to kind of go into the gut and stuff. Final federal, it may or may not happen, but this endowment piece is going to be very important. And so I bring that up because I know the association gets accused at times by some folks in the extreme left that it's just nothing more than a group that is all about cutting down trees. That's not the case. In fact, this is a very good case that what this is about is making sure counties don't have to constantly go back to Congress and ask for SRS dollars to help with our budgets. And in fact, if this endowment does pass, it will not be managed by the government. It's going to be basically managed by Treasury Management, so fund managers with a board of directors overseeing the endowment. And so, but ONC, Kevin Davis, the attorney for ONC, has been very much engaged in helping Senator Wyden and his staff and Senator Crapo and his staff actually write this. And I can't say enough about Mr. Davis's work on this. And like I said, I was on the original work group that Senator Wyden asked to be part of. And then since then, I've handed it off to the ONC Executive Committee. But Jay's been privy to this. He's been part of this. And so that would be my thought, in that, but we have to do it quickly, because the idea is that these names and folks have to be set and ready to go in January. And so if we do it now, then the names are on the new reconfigured ONC board. The names are there and ready to go for the first meeting. So that's, anything else you want to add, Mr. Chair? I know that you heard the bylaws as changes as well.
Yeah, and I have the actual bylaws here, and it basically says, that the Board of Directors shall consist of one member designated by the Board of Commissioners from each member county. Member counties shall designate their representative on the Board of Directors at the annual association's annual meeting each year. But then it goes on to say members of the Board of Directors shall serve from a period of 1 year commencing on January 1 of the year following their designation. So if we don't designate somebody in 18, we don't have anyone technically filling that position for 19 on their board. So, and this opportunity to have representation. Commissioner Sorensen.
So in the past, the Association of ONC Counties had a process whereby the Board of Directors would select the Board of Directors. And so, as you mentioned, individual counties would be ONC counties wouldn't necessarily have a member on the Board of Directors. So are they expanding the Board of Directors to have each county that's a member of the Association of ONC Counties?
Yes.
Okay, so that's presently 16 of 18 counties, so 16 board members, one from each
Yeah.
of the 16.
Without the executive team, if somebody from your county's on the executive team, you don't get another board member.
Yeah.
So it's going to be 13.
Board,
plus
the
three.
board elects the executive.
Yeah.
committee.
Well, the membership elects the executive
Yeah.
team.
Oh,
And the membership elected the board before. At the annual meetings, each county has their proxy votes.
Right.
And at that time, they were only electing 8 board members and 3 executive committee members. So quite often, some counties would end up with two members on the board, somebody executive team and somebody on the board. And some counties would end up with none.
Right.
That was part of what they're trying to resolve. So this way, every county has one person on the board of the total 16.
right. Thank you.
Yeah. The only problem is, and I believe we got a letter from the association and Tim Freeman recently asking us to appoint somebody before the first of the year.
Yes.
And we have one more meeting to do so. So as an agenda to team request, we just need to provide direction to staff. Does this come back under a consent item to designate? And, Sid's suggesting myself, and I have been involved in the meetings since I became a commissioner, even when Commissioner Stewart was our designated representative. I attended as an ex officio non-voting person, so I've been involved in the association for all 8 years I've been a commissioner. If that's, if I can get head nods around that direction, or is there some other, does this need to come back as a discussion item? It kind of, do we want to do it just as a consent item?
I was just thinking consent because our agenda's so
Yeah,
full.
we do have a really full, that's why
That's
I'm
why I was
asking for
recommending
clear
consent.
direction. So consent item and with myself as the designee.
So,
Is that-
okay, all right.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate getting through that. Any other agenda team requests? Commissioner Light?
Not an agenda team request, but just one last comment on this. And I can't emphasize enough how important that Lane County remain engaged on this process with, because frankly, I think some of us went into this with a little skepticism. There's nothing wrong with that. I think you need to have an open mind when you're working with, because you're so used to securable school, so used to going to the trough, if you will, the public trough. And so with this concept, it was, wow, I don't know about this. But since that time, this is where it's been kind of, because at times Senator Wyden's been at odds a little bit with the ONC, Association of ONC Counties, and especially the executive board. The executive board actually voted to support. And that is a huge, I think a huge foot forward. So watching Commissioner Freeman in particular engage with Mary Gautreaux from Senator Wyden's office has really been a lot of fun for me because I know them both so well. But just it's going to be very important for this board to remain engaged because Lane County, if you were to look and split things out, Lane County is the 3rd largest recipient of ONC, but we're the largest recipient of U.S. Forest Service money, not only in the state of Oregon, but really nationally. And so it's going to be really important for us to stay engaged in this. I think this concept has good legs, and I think it warrants warrants support from not only the ONC, but I think eventually Lane County to support the efforts of what Senator Wyden's doing with Senator Crapo. It looks like it's going to be bipartisan all the way. So that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I guess while we're in agenda team request, I'll make a suggestion, and maybe just Commissioner Sorensen can put this in the back of his mind. Doug and Chris with the ONC Counties Association do a great job on about, maybe takes about 45 minutes to do history of the ONC, and then a review of what a good management plan could do for the ONC. And it's not what most people think. It includes a lot of riparian area and acreage and a 200-year rotation. You know, not what you would think, and not just all clear cut. Chris Caldwell and Doug Robertson. And Chris is a former BLM employee, was an analyst for BLM, so he has the analytic background to look at that. Having them come in and make a presentation to the board in a public meeting might be a nice work session item to bring the new board members up to speed, and maybe even refresh some people about what those lands really are, and also just the potential for those lands, if in combination with this endowment, to build that endowment up to really support public services here in Lane County and the rest of the counties in Southwest Oregon. So just a future item. With that, are there any other agenda team requests? Seeing none.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Not a request, just an update. Last week, I requested a work session on using county properties and for potential sites for either car camping or other types of camping, including, and I included in my request, park properties. I understand that that's not going to happen on the 18th, but do we have an update on when that work session may be
I believe
forwarded?
that's scheduled for when there's another item coming back on the, is it the 15th? Or I think it's it's one of the first meetings in January, not the
January 9th.
Is
Kosovic, yeah,
January 9th.
Commissioner
is
Farr.
our budget meeting.
Oops, January 8th.
the 8th?
Excuse me.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, good. And so the timing on that is prior to the TAC report that we'll be receiving in
Yes, January 22nd.
coordination with the City Council. Perfect. Thank you. That is all I needed. Thank you.
Couple of quick things. On the TAC report, my understanding is their contract says they have to get that to us by December 31. I'm wondering if we could have that confirmed and emailed out to us when they finish their report in late December. The second is that on the Board of Commissioners website, we have, of course, all the agendas that for the upcoming meeting. I'm just looking at the one right now for December 11 and today and tomorrow's meeting. But what I don't see on these agendas, some obviously say down week, right? So there's nothing. But what I don't see is on presently, today, the items that we have just been talking about for either December 18 or January, 8. We don't have those on the Board of Commissioners agendas. So all we see for December 18 is that there's a meeting on December 18, but we know because the agenda teams already put things on there, or the board in the past couple of months has put things on there, or that there's a rollover of some kind of public hearing or something else. I'm wondering how difficult it would be to put those things, even though there's no material, but it does tell people what's coming up on that meeting.
So there, if you, on the same page, if you click future agenda items, if we do know something, we put it up there to a certain degree. Now, I don't see anything for December, but we do try and track some of the future that are.
Mine goes out to October.
Yeah, which I think they just haven't, and we just, until the agenda team meeting before the actual meeting, the official agenda is not set because the process of getting agenda items submitted to the board process to where they go through legal counsel and everything else takes a while.
Obviously, it's subject to the decision of the agenda team before a formal agenda is adopted. But I'm just pointing out that the things that we were discussing even in this meeting, our our meeting for the 18th is really jammed up. Well, obviously, you know, the chair knows that because he's been involved in setting the agenda, but I just don't see the public isn't told that. That's what I'm saying. And only items where we've agreed
Yeah, there
that it's
probably
going to go.
Yeah, there are a couple items we probably could have shown, because we did approve second reading for a couple ordinances for the 18th.
Yeah,
So those could easily show up sooner than later.
Yeah.
Chair Bosevich, Commissioner Sorensen, first of all, Dana Jones is coming down to join us to talk about the scheduling element. As I understand it, you're asking that there be some tool that is the tentative agenda. It's not carved in stone, but they're projected out into the future to have an understanding of.
I wouldn't even call it tentative agenda. I call it items the board thinks will come up at this time if the board knows. If we don't know, then we don't put it on there.
Hi, Diana Jones. We do, for example, your ordinance rolled to a 6th reading today. If you go to the Lane County webpage and you look at orders and ordinances, anytime we roll an order like that, it will be posted, this was rolled to the next day. And so those are there. We have other future agenda items that are often moving targets. And those are posted internally for staff, and as Commissioner Bosevich had said, until we actually set the agenda, we don't publish those as items. But if they are official public hearings and public noticed meetings, we do have them in various locations, mostly with the ordinances. So if you go to the Lane County webpage, look at the ordinances, you'll see either it passed or you'll see what it's going to roll to for a future day. And then staff, like in Public Works, also then notices those in a different way. You'll also see certain items being posted on the calendar, such as the JEO on the 22nd, if it's a different meeting, things like that. The problem with us trying to post it to the board page, again, is the moving target, the nature of things changing all the time, and us running the risk of mislabeling something. So when it's a definite set date, it is in various places on the website, and we can discuss further maybe some future ways of doing that, but the data, it is there. It's just kind of knowing where to look. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So you will see today that the 5th reading has been rolled to January 15th on that ordinance, and you can go back through the history of all those ordinances and see what we've done and when the meeting will happen, things like that.
Great. Is that-
Yep.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Diana. So, any other agenda team requests? If not, then we'll move to review of assignments, which I think we got a few.
Chair Bosevich, Commissioners, it's my understanding that there were no assignments from this morning. From this afternoon, I have the 6th reading and public hearing on Ordinance 1808 scheduled for time certain, 1:30 p.m., January 15th, 2019. I have for next week, December 18th, a consent calendar item to designate Jay Bosevich to serve on the Board of O&C Counties. I have confirmation that the TAC report is due to the county no later than December 31st, and that is to be, that you would like that information confirmed and that be given to the board post haste. And I don't know if there were head nods there, but I know that material is due to us on no later than the 31st, and it's no hardship to get that out when we get it.
Any other assignments we missed? Any other business for the board today? I will remind folks that we have a regular board meeting tomorrow joint with the Fair Board. And after that, we have our mandatory statutorily required tour of the jail that we have to do once a year. So we need to have a quorum present for both. So I hope that's on everybody's calendars for tomorrow. If that is all for the day, I will adjourn today's meeting. See you tomorrow.